Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So we're working towards Ixalan and Standard Rotation, which means this week, and I think next week as well, we're going to use our Tuesday Type 2/Standard Deck Tech to hop back in a time machine, check out some super sweet old decks, and this deck might not be all that powerful on its own, but it is very important to the history of Magic. So this is Pre-Sligh, and it comes to us from Andrea Reddy, who took it to a top 8 finish in Worlds 1995, so a long time ago. And the reason this deck is important, it is essentially the first, or the forerunner even, to the first mono red deck. Sligh was like the original red deck win slash Ramunap Red slash whatever we call it, but this was the first red aggressive deck, and while Sligh itself, I think, officially started at Worlds 1998 is when it first showed up, this is kind of the forerunner of the Sligh slash red deck wins archetype. So it means all the red decks that have come after can kind of be traced back to Worlds 95 with this pre-Sligh build from Andrea Reddy. So it's really interesting to take a look at just how far this has come. Think about Ramunap Red. One of the best decks in Standard, likely to continue to be one of the best decks in Ixalan Standard. Think about that deck, and this is basically the 1995 version of that. If you were a Ramunap Red player in 1995, this is what you'd be going to battle with. So see how far things have come, how much things have changed. Pretty interesting to do every once in a while. So let's jump right into it with the creatures, and 1-drops in red have certainly come a long way over the past 22 years. The 1-drops in this deck, we got 2 Goblin Balloon Brigade, which just a 1/1 for 1, so not a lot of power for a 1-drop. Normally you want 2 powered 1-drops, but it has a bit of an upside that you can pay a red to give it flying until end of turn, so it can become evasive. Even stranger is Orcish Spy, another 1-mana 1/1. You can look at the top 3 cards of target player's library and put them back in the same order, so you just get to peek. You can't really do anything with those cards, but you know what's coming next into your opponent's hand, which I guess gives you some small information advantage. You can also look at the top of your deck and see how depressed you are when you have 3 mountains coming and you know you're not going to win with your aggressive red deck. So those are the 1-drops. As far as the rest of the creature base, it continues pretty jankily. Uthden Troll is a 3-mana 2/2 regenerator, which probably wouldn't even be good in limited these days, maybe barely good in limited. And then topping out our curve, we have some creatures with massive drawbacks. Goblin Mutant and Org, which are actually pretty similar. They're really big for their mana cost, especially for back in the day. You gotta remember, this is creatures from 22 years ago. You didn't have Verdurous Gearhulk, you didn't have the Titan Cycle. Things were a bit different in creature land back then. Goblin Mutant, 4-mana 5/3 with Trample. Org, 5-mana 6/6 with Trample. So the problem with these are, if an opponent has an untapped creature with power greater than 2, these creatures simply can't attack. So all your opponent has to do is leave a creature back, and these creatures can't really do anything. So you gotta kind of kill your opponent's stuff, or hope that they don't have any somewhat big creatures sitting around, and you also can't block big creatures with them. So the way these play is you're basically hoping you can use your removal spells to keep your opponent's creatures off the board. If you can get in really huge chunks of damage, but if your opponent has any big creatures around, they just do absolutely nothing. The spells are a little bit better. We got Lightning Bolt, still awesomely good. Incinerate, very strong as well. Pretty much an upgrade on Lightning Strike, which we're all celebrating the return to Standard. So while the creatures are incredibly bad, the burn spells are actually really good. Also have Disintegrate and Fireball, which are basically fireballs. Disintegrate's a little bit different. Instead of being able to split up the damage, you can exile a creature that dies because of it. But these are just big burn spells. Dump all your mana into them, throw them at your opponent's face. These things can also kill creatures, so we can keep attacking with our Goblin Mutants and our Orgs and such. Detonate is like an artifact destruction burn spell, and then Stone Rain to attack our opponent's mana base. And then this is where things get a little bit weird. We have a bunch of different artifacts. Black Vice actually makes a lot of sense. Comes down for just a single mana, and it really punishes control decks. For every card your opponent has more than 4 in their hand, they take a damage from Black Vice. So if your opponent has 7 cards in hand, they're going to take 3 damage on their upkeep. If they have 6 cards, 2 damage, etc., etc. It's basically a reverse worst version of the rack, but it punishes control decks instead of punishing people that are out of cards like the rack does. Then we have a bunch of strange artifacts. Nevernal's Disc gives us a Wrath, not traditionally something you think of in a mono red aggro deck. Icy Manipulator, a bit of removal by tapping things down. The Tome gives us a way to draw a card, also something you wouldn't think of playing in a mono red deck these days. 4 mana artifact, pay 4 to draw a card, but I guess it helps you go long. Jester's Cap lets you get rid of combo pieces from your opponent's deck, and then the weirdest one of all, and this card just cracked me up when I saw it, Millstone. So you're playing mono red aggro. Think of Ramunap Red. You're playing Ramunap Red, trying to kill your opponent with 1 mana 1/1s and lightning bolts to the face and all these super aggressive things, and you have Millstone as your backup plan. So if everything goes wrong and you can only get in 19 damage and you end up 1 damage short, you just start Millstoning your opponent to get them to 0 cards in library. It definitely seems like the old trying to kill your opponent with infect and also with normal damage problem. So I don't know. I have no idea why you would ever consider playing Millstone in your Sligh deck or mono red deck, but interesting nonetheless. As far as the mana base, Dwarven Ruins gives us a Fallen Empires card, also a little bit of extra mana here and there, a Strip Mine to attack our opponent's mana base, and then some mountains. As far as the sideboard, we get some pretty normal stuff. Shatter for artifacts, Pyroclasm for creatures, Dwarven Hold. Now I'm assuming, and I could be wrong here, but I believe this was when there was a restriction where you had to play so many cards from the Fallen Empires and Homeland sets in your deck. So I'm guessing that the Dwarven Hold is a way to get around that restriction and meet that requirement. And then we have Zeranorb and Iron Star is a bit of life gain, so if you run into the mirror, these cards will be really good to gain a bit of life. Red Elemental Blast makes sense to deal with blue decks, and then this deck really did not want to lose to white decks. We have 2 Anarchies and 2 Flash Fires. Anarchy blows up all white permanents, lets creatures and enchantments and everything. Flash Fires, Armageddon, but only for planes. So if you run into a mono white deck, these cards are going to be insanely swingy, powerful sideboard options. And that is Pre-Sligh from 1995 Worlds, the very beginning of red deck wins, Ramunap Red, all those decks. So it's just really interesting to see how far things have come. All the 1-drops are only 1 power, which often isn't even playable today. Think of the creatures to see play. Hazoret compared to like Org, or compared to our Goblin Mutant. Like, think of how far it's come. Back then, you were playing a 4 mana 5/3 with massive downsides. You might not even be able to attack with it half the game. Now you have Hazoret, a 5 mana 5/5 that's indestructible, throws shocks at your opponent's face. So you can see that creatures have come a long way. On the other hand, players today are rejoicing because of the return of Lightning Strike, when back then, you didn't just have Lightning Strike, you had Incinerate, which is a strict upgrade on Lightning Strike, and you had actual Lightning Bolt, not to mention the Fireballs and all the burn spells, 3 mana Land Destruction, which does work pretty well if you're curving out with these Orcish Spies and Goblin Balloon Brigades. You can keep your opponent off mana and keep beating down with your little things. I will never understand the Millstone, and that's the other interesting part, is you can see how far deck theory has come. You wouldn't consider playing Nev Disc in your mono red deck today. You wouldn't play the Tome. You wouldn't be playing Millstone for sure. So this was a world championship level deck back in the day. So it's really interesting to see not just how the cards have changed, but how cumulatively, as a community, as a group of players, we have learned so much more about building decks and making decks optimal over the past 22 years. So anyway, next time you sit down to play Ramunap Red and Ixalan Standard, take a minute, think back on how thankful you are that you're not playing Orgs, and you're not playing Millstones, and you're not playing Goblin Balloon Brigades, and see how far the archetype has come over the past 20 years. Anyway, that's our Instant Deck Tech for today. Pre-Sligh from 1995 Worlds in the hands of Andrea already. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.